So the first insurrectionist to plead guilty to a felony crime, a defendant by the name of Paul Hodgkins, was sentenced today in federal court in Washington, D.C., and his sentence was not exactly what most expected. Let's talk about that. Because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So let's go through the pros and cons regarding today's sentencing hearing in the case of insurrectionist Paul Hodgkins. Here's how NBC News reported out the results today. Headline: Florida man gets 8 months in prison in first felony sentence from Capitol riot. Paul Allard Hodgkins, 38, of Tampa, was arrested February 16 and pleaded guilty last month to a single felony count of obstructing an official proceeding. Now, what is it that Defendant Hodgkins did? Well, he packed his insurrectionist kit, including goggles, latex gloves, rope, and other items. He got on a bus in his home in Tampa, Florida, traveled to Washington, D.C., attended Donald Trump's pep rally, his hate rally, his Stop the Certification rally on January 6th. Then Defendant Hodgkins went to the Capitol, breached the Capitol, went to the Senate chamber, entered the Senate chamber, took to the floor, waving the Trump 2020 flag, saluted the Trump 2020 flag, among other conduct. Now, Hodgkins didn't assault anybody, didn't damage property, but he pleaded guilty to the felony count of obstructing a congressional proceeding, obstructing the certification of the presidential election results, attempting to overthrow the democracy, stop it dead in its tracks. That's what Defendant Hodgkins pleaded guilty to. Now, for pleading guilty to that one felony count, the statute said he could receive up to 20 years. That's the maximum penalty for violating that particular federal statute. But that's unrealistic because sentences are governed by the federal sentencing guidelines. And the guideline range for his conduct, for his guilty plea, put him between 15 and 21 months in prison. So that was the sentence pretty much everybody was expecting. Problem is, Judge Randy Moss, for some reason, decided to give him an inexplicably lenient sentence, a complete windfall that this defendant did not deserve. He sentenced him to 8 months. That is 7 months less than the most benign, the least problematic crime of obstructing a congressional proceeding. So Judge Randy Moss lost sight of the treason forest for the petty crimes trees. And I can talk more about what that means in a moment. But let's turn to the pros and cons. What are the pros? Because there are some pros. This defendant pleaded guilty to a felony charge obstructing Congress's attempt to certify the election results that will be a building block plea. It's an important guilty plea. He didn't plead guilty to trespassing or damaging government property or even assaulting a police officer. He pleaded guilty to doing exactly what Donald Trump told him to do: go to the Capitol and stop the certification. Donald Trump used the word steal, but there was no steal going on. A certification was going on, and Donald Trump told this defendant and others to go stop it. And he pleaded guilty to doing exactly what Donald Trump told him to do. That makes this an important building block plea as the prosecutors work their way up the criminal food chain. The other pro here is that this defendant will be spending 8 months in prison for doing precisely what Donald Trump told him to do. What are some of the cons? Well, the big con, is that this defendant got an unduly lenient sentence for a reason that the judge didn't even seem to bother to explain. Why he would go 7 months below the absolute lowest guideline range for this crime. And the fact that he got such a lenient sentence, only 8 months in prison, when the prosecutors were asking for 18, which was a heartland guideline request, an appropriate request by the prosecutors, the fact that he got an extremely lenient sentence will probably cause the other 500 plus defendants to think, maybe I should take my chances, if that's all I'm facing, take my chances at trial, not plead guilty, not cooperate with the prosecutors, not provide information about the criminal acts of others that would assist the prosecutors in their investigations and prosecutions. So Judge Moss did a real disservice to the insurrection case overall, and frankly, he damaged our democracy a little bit by making it all the harder to appropriately hold insurrectionists accountable for their crimes. This decision by Judge Moss, we will survive it. The prosecutors will go on and will continue to build their case. But it's particularly galling when you listen to the words of other federal court judges in Washington, D.C., who take this matter much more seriously than apparently did Judge Moss. Because other judges have said things like, and this comes directly from the prosecutor's sentencing memorandum in the Hodgkins case. Other federal court judges have said about the insurrection, quote, "The violent breach of the Capitol on January 6 was a grave danger to our democracy. A singular and chilling event in U.S. history, raising legitimate concern about the security not only of the Capitol building, but of our democracy itself." Another federal court judge said, "This is not rhetorical flourish. This reflects the concern of my colleagues and myself for what we view as an incredibly dangerous and disturbing attack on a free electoral system." And I'll finish with this quote from another federal judge. "The actions of this violent mob, particularly those who breached the police lines and gained entry to the Capitol," and that's what Defendant Hodgkins did, "are reprehensible as offenses against morality, civic virtue, and the rule of law." And yet today, the judge imposed an extraordinarily lenient sentence, 7 months below even the lowest guideline sentence that should be imposed for this crime. That is a significant con on the list of pros and cons, because what happened today with that sentence being imposed was not justice. Not by the American people. It was not justice by our democracy. And justice matters. Folks, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.